You know that moment when a room falls into a heavy, unnatural silence when everyone senses someone is about to be sacrificed, but no one dares breathe. That morning, the person on the chopping block was me. It was Monday, 8:45 a.m., on the 33rd floor of Horizon Atlantic headquarters in Atlanta. The glass meeting room was bright enough to sting the eyes. The air conditioning blasted colder than necessary, and a long table stretched across the room, covered in open laptops as if waiting for a verdict. I walked in with the updated system report I had spent my entire weekend reviewing, still believing this was another routine technical meeting. After nearly 20 years safeguarding FAA compliance, mornings like this were ordinary. The sunlight poured through the massive windows, reflecting off the gray leather chairs. Everyone was already seated. Elias Carter, the newly appointed chief executive, young, polished, and convinced he had been born to reinvent the aviation industry, sat at the head of the table. Next to him was Glenn Mercer, the coup, a man whose voice was louder than his competence and whose confidence came from draining credit from everyone around him. I took a seat. My report hit the table softly, but not a single person looked at me. The entire executive team kept their eyes glued to their screens, including people who had worked beside me for more than a decade. Even Lee Park, my former mentee, the one I guided through every FAA metric, refused to meet my eyes. She stared at the table's edge like someone hiding from guilt. Elias began in a calm tone, but his voice carried no sincerity. He read out last week's flight delays as though I had personally planted them. Glenn chimed in with his usual dramatic certainty, claiming the optimization module was outdated and that old thinking held the airline back. Their words did not hurt. I had long accepted that some people choose blame over data. The truth was simple. Glenn had ordered an aggressive schedule that shoved crew duty time to the edge of legal limits, shaving rest periods thin to squeeze in more flights. FAA regulations do not bend for ambition, and the fallout was inevitable. When it backfired, they needed someone to absorb the damage. I was convenient, the oldest on the team, the highest technical seat, and the only one who publicly opposed Glenn's reckless plan. Elias closed his laptop with a soft, final click, a sound like sealing a coffin. He looked at me with a decision already carved in stone. He told me I would no longer hold the position of Senior Director of Flight Operations Systems. I was terminated immediately, right there, in front of the entire executive table. No private conversation, no respect, no acknowledgement of the 2 decades I spent protecting FAA compliance. No one lifted their head, no one objected. Laptop screens stayed open like shields. Lee bit her lip but said nothing. Silence was their currency of survival. I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I simply checked the time. 9:42 a.m. The second hand slipped past the 42. At that exact moment, my system automatically triggered the reclaim clause for the commercial optimization module, buried deep in a contract they had never bothered to read. I didn't have to lift a finger. Everything was programmed years ago for this moment. Calmly, I placed my badge on the table. The plastic's soft tap on the glass sounded like the period at the end of a sentence no one wanted to write. I looked at Elias, then Glenn, not to plead, but to memorize the last image I would ever need of them. I managed a faint smile and read light. "I understand your decision," I said. A thought drifted across my mind, sharp as a blade. I always assumed you knew how to read a contract. That was too generous. I walked past Lee. She didn't raise her head. I rested my hand lightly on the back of her chair, not to comfort her, but to remind her of the cost of silence. Then I left, letting the glass door close behind me. Its echo lingered in the hallway, but to me, it signaled something else, the opening of my own story. Before I go on, I want to know where you're watching from. This happened in Atlanta, but disregard for others has no borders. Where careless power exists, reluctant silence follows. Somewhere, someone is always being sacrificed for a mistake they did not make. And if you've ever witnessed that, you know exactly how I felt. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to defend myself. I only needed to walk out because I knew something they didn't. They thought they ended my story. They didn't realize I had written the next chapter long before they opened their mouths. I have never forgotten the day this airline stood one breath away from being shut down by the FAA. 12 years ago, Horizon Atlantic was hanging by a thread, and the executives behaved as if panic were a contagious disease. Back then, the maintenance failure list was so long you could feel fear just scanning the pages. Crew schedules were chaos. Duty time violations everywhere. One pilot flew nearly double the legal hours in a single day, unnoticed. FAA letters stacked like tombstones. They were out of time. Back then, I ran a small, unknown LLC. Horizon called me only because they had exhausted every other contact. I wasn't there to save their airline. I was there to preserve enough safety to prevent deaths. When I saw how broken their data was, I knew patches wouldn't save them. They needed an entirely new system. Atlas was born on a cold night in a Boston hotel bar during an aviation conference I couldn't focus on. Instead of typing, I grabbed a napkin and sketched the framework of a system that could force safety into every operational decision. By chance, board member Harold Stein sat beside me. He saw the sketch, listened to my explanation, and told me to present it the next morning. That napkin became the blueprint that revived an airline. I spent 6 relentless months building Atlas, no vacations, no weekends, coding during flights, editing manuals in terminals, falling asleep on my keyboard. And when Atlas launched, everything changed. Duty time violations plummeted, maintenance synced, FAA reports stabilized. Horizon emerged from near collapse into 3 straight years of growth. Atlas wasn't magic. It was discipline. Logic, respect for the law, 3 things new leadership treated as optional. They benefited from every safeguard Atlas created, yet conveniently forgot the chaos they once lived in. They blamed me for delays caused by Glenn's illegal scheduling, forgetting the FAA had once prepared to suspend their entire fleet. I didn't forget, and as they marched toward their flashy transformation 2.0, I saw the warning signs instantly. These so-called transformations always start with glowing slides and end with someone losing their job. They built their narrative carefully. New leadership, young engineers full of buzzwords, delay charts stripped of context, and a shiny new face. Lee, my former mentee, elevated because she wouldn't challenge them. They never mentioned the FAA once. Speed over safety, image over law, profit over people. The story they wanted was clear. Everything wrong was my fault. The only flaw in their plan, they forgot I built the system they depended on. After my termination, I went home early. The apartment was quiet enough that the sound of the door latch echoed. I went straight to my desk, opened my laptop, and logged into the Atlas license console, the system I had protected for 12 years. I could shut the entire airline down in 30 seconds. Atlas was powerful enough to resurrect an airline. It could just as easily bury one command, one key press, total operational collapse. I typed the deletion command just to test myself. The terminal flashed confirm. My finger rested on the enter key. But I thought of pilots' families, children pressing their faces against the cabin window. Their safety was never optional, not to me. I deleted the command. I would never destroy Atlas. Protection is my profession, not destruction. But ethics is not submission. They fired me publicly, humiliated me, and pinned their recklessness on me. I would not help them manipulate Atlas for profit, so I chose a different path, one entirely legal, fully protected, and posing zero threat to safety. I opened the license allocation screen. The modules glowed softly. I selected the ones at the center. The commercial optimization suite, the very tools Glenn and his team abused to force profit over regulation. They didn't own those modules. My contract was explicit. If the partnership ended involuntarily, I could revoke every license instantly. They fired me publicly, involuntarily. They opened that door, and all I had to do was walk through it.